The young waitress whispered in perfect Mandarin, "Your business partner is lying to you." And tech billionaire Marcus Wellington froze mid-handshake. I'll never forget the expression that crossed his face when those words reached his ears. His confident smile evaporating, his grip loosening on the hand of the Chinese investor he'd been courting for months. His entire demeanor shifting from assured businessman to someone who'd just discovered the ground beneath his feet wasn't as solid as he'd believed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was the moment that would reshape not just a billion-dollar deal, but everything I thought I knew about power, deception, and the unexpected places wisdom can emerge from. My name is Thomas Richardson, and until 8 months ago, I was Marcus Wellington's executive assistant and translator coordinator. For 7 years, I managed the international communications for one of Silicon Valley's most ambitious entrepreneurs, a man whose tech empire spanned 3 continents and whose personal fortune fluctuated between $4 and $5 billion, depending on quarterly earnings and market volatility. Marcus had built Wellington Dynamics from a small software startup in his Stanford dorm room into a global powerhouse, specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning platforms. His company's facial recognition software powered security systems in airports across America, while his predictive analytics algorithms helped Fortune 500 companies optimize everything from supply chains to marketing campaigns. I had an office on the 32nd floor of the Wellington Tower in downtown San Francisco, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, a 6-figure salary that most people in my position could only dream of, and access to boardroom conversations that moved markets. My primary responsibility was coordinating Marcus's international business meetings, ensuring proper translation services, and managing cultural protocols for deals that often involved hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, I'm preparing to provide testimony in what the San Francisco Chronicle has dubbed the most significant corporate fraud case in Silicon Valley history. But this story doesn't begin in a courtroom or a corporate boardroom. It begins in an upscale restaurant in Chinatown, during what should have been the culmination of Marcus's most ambitious expansion yet. The Golden Phoenix was Marcus's preferred venue for hosting high-stakes international business dinners. Located on Grant Avenue, the restaurant occupied 3 floors of a meticulously restored Victorian building, its interior a seamless blend of traditional Chinese aesthetics and modern luxury. Red lacquered columns supported intricate ceiling artwork, while private dining rooms featured hand-carved wooden screens that provided both elegance and discretion for sensitive negotiations. Marcus had reserved the restaurant's most exclusive private dining room for what he considered the most important meeting of his career. After 18 months of negotiations, planning, and diplomatic maneuvering, he was finally sitting down with Chen Weiming, the enigmatic chairman of Sunrise Industries, one of China's largest technology conglomerates. The deal on the table was staggering in its scope and potential impact. Sunrise Industries wanted to license Wellington Dynamics' entire suite of AI technologies for the Chinese market, a partnership that would immediately triple Marcus's company's revenue and establish Wellington Dynamics as a dominant force in the world's second-largest economy. The licensing agreement alone was worth $2.8 billion over 5 years, with additional revenue streams from joint ventures, technology sharing, and expanded manufacturing partnerships. For Marcus, this represented more than just financial success. He'd spent years building relationships in Chinese business circles, learning Mandarin himself with moderate success, and studying the complex cultural dynamics that could make or break international partnerships. He understood that in Chinese business culture, personal relationships often mattered as much as profit margins, and that trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild. Chen Weiming had flown to San Francisco with a delegation of 6 executives, each representing different aspects of Sunrise Industries' vast operations. There was Liu Xiaoping, the chief technology officer who would oversee the integration of Wellington's AI systems, Zheng Mei, the legal counsel responsible for navigating China's complex regulatory environment, and Wang Zhanyu, the financial director who controlled Sunrise's technology acquisition budget. The dinner was scheduled to be the final step in sealing the partnership, a ceremonial conclusion to months of technical due diligence, legal review, and financial analysis. Marcus had hired Patricia Chen, one of San Francisco's most respected Mandarin interpreters, to ensure flawless communication throughout the evening. Patricia commanded $1,500 per hour for high-stakes business translations, and her reputation for discretion and accuracy had made her the preferred interpreter for tech executives conducting sensitive negotiations with Chinese partners. Everything was proceeding according to plan until Patricia called my office at 4:30 that afternoon, her voice strained with obvious distress. "Thomas, I'm in the emergency room at UCSF. I was in a car accident on Highway 101. I'm fine, but there's no way I can make tonight's dinner. I've been trying to reach every qualified interpreter in the city, but everyone's either booked or out of town." The panic that shot through me was immediate and visceral. This wasn't just any business dinner that could be rescheduled. Chen Weiming's delegation was flying back to Shanghai the following morning, and the timing of the deal was critical due to pending regulatory changes in China that would take effect within weeks. Postponing the dinner could mean losing the partnership entirely, along with the billions in revenue it represented. I immediately began working through my emergency contact list, calling every translation service and independent interpreter in the Bay Area. The responses were consistently disappointing. The qualified business interpreters were already committed to other assignments, while the available translators lacked the specialized knowledge needed for complex technology negotiations. Marcus was in back-to-back meetings, preparing for the dinner when I finally reached him with the crisis. His reaction was exactly what I'd expected: controlled fury masked by the forced calm he displayed when facing potential disasters. "Fix this, Thomas. I don't care what it costs or who you have to call. This dinner cannot fail because of a translation problem." By 6 o'clock, with the dinner scheduled to begin at 7:30, I was approaching desperation. I'd contacted translation services as far away as Los Angeles and Seattle, offered premium rates that would normally guarantee immediate service, and even considered flying in an interpreter from another city, though the logistics made that option virtually impossible. That's when Marcus made a decision that would prove to be both pragmatic and fateful. "We'll proceed without a professional interpreter," he announced as we rode the elevator down to the parking garage. "My Mandarin is functional for basic conversation, and Chen speaks reasonable English. Between the two of us, we should be able to handle the essential points." I should have pushed back more forcefully. As his assistant, it was my responsibility to anticipate problems and provide alternatives. But Marcus had a confidence that was often contagious, and his Mandarin, while not fluent, was genuinely better than most American business people managed. He'd studied the language for 3 years, practiced with native speakers, and had successfully conducted preliminary negotiations with Chen's team using a combination of English and Mandarin. The Golden Phoenix was already buzzing with activity when we arrived. The hostess, a elegantly dressed woman in her 50s, greeted Marcus by name and escorted us to the private dining room where the table had been set for 10 people. The room itself was a masterpiece of understated luxury. Dark wood paneling, traditional landscape paintings, and a circular table that encouraged conversation while maintaining the formal atmosphere appropriate for serious business discussions. Chen Weiming and his delegation arrived precisely at 7:30, their punctuality reflecting the respect they held for the occasion. The introductions proceeded smoothly, with Marcus demonstrating his cultural awareness by greeting each member of the Chinese delegation with appropriate bows and business card exchanges, using both hands, a detail that clearly impressed Chen. The first course was served by waitstaff, who moved with practiced efficiency, filling teacups and presenting small plates of appetizers that had been carefully selected to appeal to both American and Chinese palates. The conversation flowed reasonably well, with Marcus and Chen managing to communicate through their shared English vocabulary supplemented by Marcus's Mandarin phrases. But as the evening progressed and the discussion moved toward more technical aspects of the partnership agreement, the linguistic challenges became increasingly apparent. Subtle misunderstandings began creeping into the conversation, moments where Chen would pause with a slight frown, clearly uncertain about a technical term Marcus had used, or instances where Marcus would nod along to Chen's explanation while I could see from his expression that he wasn't entirely certain he'd understood the specifics. The turning point came during the main course, when Chen began explaining the regulatory framework that would govern the technology transfer. He was speaking in rapid Mandarin, his excitement about the partnership evident in his animated gestures and rising voice. Marcus was nodding and responding with what sounded like appropriate phrases, but I noticed beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. That's when she appeared. The young woman couldn't have been more than 25, dressed in the standard black uniform of the Golden Phoenix waitstaff, with long dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She moved quietly around the table, refilling water glasses and removing empty plates with the invisible efficiency that marked experienced restaurant workers. There was nothing about her appearance or demeanor that suggested she was anything other than what she appeared to be: another member of the service staff performing her duties professionally and unobtrusively. But something about the way she hesitated near Marcus's chair, the subtle tension in her posture as she listened to Chen's explanation, suggested she was more aware of the conversation's content than a typical waitress would be. When Chen paused to take a sip of tea, she leaned slightly closer to Marcus, ostensibly to refill his water glass. That's when she spoke those words in perfect, unaccented Mandarin that would change everything. "Your business partner is lying to you." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus's reaction to the waitress's warning was immediate and visceral. His hand, which had been reaching for his wineglass, stopped mid-motion. The color drained from his face as he processed what she'd said, and for a moment that felt like an eternity, the entire room seemed suspended in silence. Chen Weiming continued speaking, oblivious to the exchange that had just occurred. He was gesturing enthusiastically toward a tablet displaying technical specifications, his voice animated as he described the integration timeline for Wellington Dynamics facial recognition software into Sunrise Industries' existing security infrastructure. To him, everything was proceeding exactly as planned. But Marcus was no longer listening. His eyes had shifted to the young waitress, who maintained her professional composure while continuing to pour water around the table. When their gazes met briefly, she gave the slightest nod toward the restaurant's service corridor, a gesture so subtle that anyone else would have dismissed it as coincidental. I watched this silent communication with growing confusion and concern. In 7 years of working with Marcus, I'd seen him navigate countless high-pressure situations with unflappable composure. Board meetings where hostile investors challenged his every decision, congressional hearings about data privacy, even a kidnapping threat against his daughter that had required FBI intervention. Through it all, Marcus had maintained the calm, analytical demeanor that had made him one of Silicon Valley's most respected leaders. But now, sitting in this elegant Chinese restaurant with billions of dollars on the line, he looked genuinely shaken. The waitress completed her circuit of the table and disappeared through the service door, but not before making eye contact with Marcus one final time. The message was clear: "Follow me." Marcus cleared his throat and smiled at Chen, switching to his carefully practiced Mandarin. "Mr. Chen, would you excuse me for just one moment? I need to make a brief call regarding our manufacturing timeline." His pronunciation was careful but adequate, and Chen nodded graciously, using the opportunity to confer quietly with his own team. "Thomas, come with me," Marcus said in English, standing with the casual confidence of someone stepping out for a routine business call. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the forced steadiness of his movements. We left the private dining room and walked toward the restaurant's main floor. The Golden Phoenix's evening rush was in full swing, with servers weaving between tables carrying elaborate dishes, the sounds of conversation and clinking glasses creating a backdrop of normalcy that contrasted sharply with the surreal situation unfolding around us. The waitress was waiting near the service station, checking her phone with practiced casualness. When she saw us approaching, she gestured toward a small alcove near the restaurant's wine storage area, a semi-private space where we could speak without being overheard by other diners or staff. Up close, I could see details I'd missed earlier. She was definitely young, probably in her mid-20s, with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of understated elegance that suggested education and refinement beyond what her current employment might indicate. Her name tag read Jessica, though something about the way she carried herself made me doubt that was her real name. "Mr. Wellington," she said quietly, her English now revealing a slight accent I couldn't immediately place. "We don't have much time. Your business partner has been lying to you about the regulatory approval for technology transfer to China. The licensing agreements he's showing you are fabricated." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, processing this information. "Who are you?" he finally asked. "Someone who doesn't want to see you make a $5 billion mistake," she replied. "Chen Weiming isn't authorized to negotiate this deal. Sunrise Industries fired him 6 weeks ago for embezzling company funds. He's been using forged documents and fake credentials to continue operating as if nothing happened. The implications of what she was saying hit me like a physical blow. If this was true, then everything we'd been working toward for the past 18 months was built on deception. The due diligence reports, the technical specifications, the financial projections, all potentially worthless. That's impossible, I said, finding my voice. We've verified everything through multiple channels. Our legal team in Shanghai confirmed his authority to negotiate. Jessica reached into her apron pocket and withdrew a smartphone. With a few quick swipes, she brought up what appeared to be a Chinese news website. The page was filled with characters I couldn't read, but the photograph was unmistakable. Chen Weiming being escorted from an office building by what looked like security personnel. This was published in the Shanghai Business Daily 6 weeks ago, she explained, translating the headline. Sunrise Industries CEO Chen Weiming terminated for financial irregularities. Company announces restructuring of International Partnerships Division. Marcus took the phone from her hands, scrolling through the article with the intense focus he typically reserved for analyzing quarterly reports. His Mandarin was good enough to pick out key phrases, and what he was reading clearly confirmed Jessica's claims. "How do you know about this?" he asked, looking up from the screen. "And why are you telling us?" Jessica hesitated for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I'm not actually a waitress," she admitted. "I'm a financial investigative journalist with the Wall Street Journal's Asia Bureau. I've been tracking Chen's activities for the past 2 months, documenting how he's been using his former position to defraud American companies." This revelation added another layer of complexity to an already surreal situation. "You've been investigating us?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying a note of indignation. "Not you specifically," Jessica clarified. "But Chen has approached at least 6 major American tech companies with similar deals over the past month. You're just the first one who got close enough to actually signing an agreement." She pulled up another screen on her phone, this one showing what appeared to be a spreadsheet with company names, dollar amounts, and dates. I recognized several familiar logos, major corporations that Wellington Dynamics competed with regularly. Dataflow Systems nearly signed a $400 million licensing deal with him 3 weeks ago, she continued. Only a last-minute background check revealed the discrepancies. Quantum Innovations got as far as transferring an initial payment of $50 million before they discovered the fraud. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his analytical mind clearly working through the implications. "If you're a journalist, why are you warning us instead of just writing the story?" "Because," Jessica said, glancing back toward the dining room where Chen and his team were still waiting, quote, "I believe the public interest is better served by preventing fraud than by documenting it after the fact. And because there's something else you need to know about tonight's dinner." She lowered her voice even further, forcing us to lean closer to hear her. "Chen isn't working alone. The men he brought with him aren't Sunrise Industries executives. They're part of an organized operation that's been targeting American technology companies for industrial espionage. The licensing agreement you're about to sign includes clauses that would give them access to your entire source code library, your client databases, and your proprietary algorithms." The blood drained from Marcus's face as the full scope of the deception became clear. This wasn't just financial fraud. It was an attempt to steal the intellectual property that formed the foundation of his entire business empire. "We need to call the FBI," I said immediately, reaching for my phone. "Wait," Marcus said, his hand on my arm. "If we alert the authorities now, they'll disappear before we can get any real answers. We need to understand the full extent of this operation." Jessica nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. There's a way to handle this that serves everyone's interests. Yours, mine, and the dozens of other companies that might be targeted next." She outlined her plan quickly and efficiently. We would return to the dinner and continue the negotiation as if nothing had happened. Jessica would remain in her role as waitress, using her position to monitor the conversation and gather additional evidence. Meanwhile, she had colleagues from the Wall Street Journal positioned outside the restaurant, ready to document Chen's team when they left. "The key," she explained, "is to get them to reveal more details about their operation. If we can document their methods and identify their other targets, we can prevent this from happening to other companies while building a solid case for prosecution." Marcus considered this for a moment, then nodded grimly. "What do you need us to do?" "Act interested but cautious," Jessica instructed. "Ask detailed questions about the technical integration process. Push for specifics about timelines and regulatory approvals. The more they have to fabricate on the spot, the more evidence we'll have of their deception. As we prepared to return to the dining room, Marcus turned to Jessica with a question that had been bothering me as well. How did you end up working here tonight? This seems like an incredible coincidence. Jessica smiled for the first time since our conversation began. It's not a coincidence. I've been tracking Chen's movements for weeks. When I learned about tonight's dinner, I convinced the restaurant manager to let me work a shift. Sometimes the best way to gather intelligence is to become invisible in plain sight. We walked back toward the private dining room, each of us preparing for what would essentially be an elaborate performance. Marcus would need to maintain his enthusiasm for the deal while subtly probing for information. I would need to take detailed notes that could later serve as evidence. And Jessica would need to continue serving dinner while secretly documenting one of the most sophisticated corporate fraud schemes any of us had ever encountered. As we approached the dining room door, Marcus paused and looked back at Jessica. I don't know why you decided to help us instead of just writing your story, but I won't forget this. Just promise me one thing, she replied. When this is all over, give me the exclusive on how it ends. Marcus smiled grimly. Deal. We stepped back into the dining room, where Chen Weiming was waiting with barely concealed impatience, ready to conclude what he believed would be the most profitable deception of his career. He had no idea that the young waitress refilling his teacup was about to help bring down his entire operation. The next 45 minutes in that private dining room were among the most intense of my professional career. Marcus returned to his seat with renewed energy, playing his role with the skill of a seasoned actor. He leaned forward with apparent enthusiasm, asking Chen increasingly detailed questions about the technical implementation process. Mr. Chen, Marcus said in carefully measured Mandarin, I'm particularly interested in understanding the exact regulatory pathway for our facial recognition algorithms. Could you walk me through the specific approvals we'll need from the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology? Chen's response was fluid and confident, but I noticed something Jessica had trained me to watch for. Micro-expressions of uncertainty that flickered across his face before he launched into detailed explanations. He spoke about regulatory frameworks and approval processes with the authority of someone who had clearly done his research, but there were subtle inconsistencies in his timeline and bureaucratic procedures that suggested fabrication. Jessica moved through the room with professional invisibility, refilling teacups and clearing plates while positioning herself to capture audio on what appeared to be a standard smartphone tucked discreetly in her apron pocket. Her movements were so natural that Chen's team paid her no attention whatsoever, treating her as part of the restaurant's fixtures rather than a potential threat to their operation. The breakthrough came when Marcus pressed Chen about the financial structure of the deal. I'd like to understand the escrow arrangements for the initial technology transfer payment, Marcus said. My financial team will need to verify the accounts before we can proceed with the wire transfer. For the first time that evening, Chen showed visible discomfort. He exchanged glances with Liu Xiaoping, the man posing as Sunrise Industries' chief technology officer, before responding with what was clearly a rehearsed answer about standard international banking protocols and regulatory compliance procedures. But Marcus wasn't finished. Drawing on his years of experience with complex international deals, he began asking increasingly specific questions about banking relationships, compliance officers, and regulatory filing requirements. Each question forced Chen to provide more detailed fabrications, and with each answer, the inconsistencies in his story became more apparent. Actually, Marcus said, pulling out his own phone, let me call our Shanghai banking partner right now to confirm these escrow procedures. It's morning there, so they should be available. The panic that flashed across Chen's face was unmistakable. Mr. Wellington, he said quickly, perhaps we should finalize the basic agreement first, then handle the banking details through our respective financial teams tomorrow. Oh, it's no trouble, Marcus replied with genuine seeming enthusiasm. I have the Director of International Transfers on speed dial. This will just take a moment. As Marcus began dialing, I watched Chen's team with growing fascination. Their carefully maintained composure was beginning to crack. Zheng Mei, who had been introduced as legal counsel, was typing frantically on her phone, presumably alerting someone outside the restaurant. Wang Jianyu kept glancing toward the door as if calculating escape routes. Jessica chose that moment to approach the table with a fresh pot of tea. As she leaned over to refill Chen's cup, she whispered something in rapid Mandarin that made him go rigid with shock. I couldn't understand what she'd said, but the effect was immediate and dramatic. Chen stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Mr. Wellington," he said, his English suddenly much more heavily accented than it had been all evening. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we should postpone this discussion until tomorrow." "Nonsense," Marcus replied, still holding his phone. "I'm just confirming the banking arrangements. This will only take—" "No," Chen interrupted, his mask of professional courtesy finally slipping entirely. "We must leave now." What happened next unfolded with the precision of a carefully choreographed operation. Jessica stepped back from the table and spoke in clear, authoritative English. "Mr. Chen, I'm Jessica Martinez with the Wall Street Journal. I'd like to ask you some questions about your termination from Sunrise Industries and your current activities targeting American technology companies." The transformation in Chen's demeanor was complete and instantaneous. The sophisticated businessman vanished, replaced by someone whose primary concern was clearly escape rather than negotiation. He barked orders in Mandarin to his team, who immediately began gathering their materials and moving toward the door. But Jessica had anticipated this reaction. As Chen reached for the dining room door, it opened to reveal two men in dark suits who identified themselves as FBI agents. Behind them stood a woman I recognized as Amanda Foster, the lead federal prosecutor for technology crimes in the Northern District of California. "Mr. Chen Weiming," Agent Foster said formally, "you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit industrial espionage, and violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. You have the right to remain silent." The arrest proceeded with professional efficiency. Chen's team members were also detained, their phones and documents seized as evidence. Through it all, Marcus sat in stunned silence, watching the culmination of 18 months of planning dissolve into a law enforcement operation. Jessica, meanwhile, had transformed yet again. Gone was the deferential waitress, replaced by a confident professional documenting the scene with the focused intensity of someone who understood the historical significance of what was unfolding. "Mr. Wellington," Agent Foster said once the arrests were complete, "we'll need you and Mr. Richardson to provide detailed statements about tonight's events. Ms. Martinez has been working with our investigation for the past 6 weeks, and your cooperation has been invaluable in building our case." As the reality of the situation settled over me, I realized that Jessica's intervention had saved Wellington Dynamics from far more than financial loss. The technology transfer agreements Chen had proposed would have given his organization access to proprietary algorithms that had taken Marcus's team years to develop. The theft of that intellectual property could have destroyed the company's competitive advantage and cost thousands of jobs. Over the following weeks, the full scope of Chen's operation became clear. The FBI investigation revealed a sophisticated network that had targeted more than 20 American technology companies over the past 2 years. The total attempted theft was valued at more than $12 billion in intellectual property and research investments. Jessica's Wall Street Journal exposé, published 3 days after the arrests, won her a Pulitzer Prize nomination and established her as one of the country's leading investigative journalists covering technology crimes. Her decision to intervene directly rather than simply observe had prevented what could have been one of the largest industrial espionage operations in corporate history. Marcus, for his part, handled the aftermath with characteristic grace and intelligence. Instead of trying to minimize Wellington Dynamics' near miss with disaster, he used the experience to advocate for stronger corporate security measures and international cooperation in combating technology theft. 6 months later, I found myself in a very different position than I'd held before that fateful dinner. Marcus had promoted me to Director of International Security, a role that involved working closely with federal law enforcement agencies to identify and prevent similar threats to American technology companies. The Golden Phoenix restaurant, meanwhile, became something of a landmark in Silicon Valley lore. The private dining room where Chen's operation unraveled was quietly renamed the Phoenix Room, though the restaurant's management preferred not to discuss the reason for the designation. As for Jessica Martinez, she returned to her role as an investigative journalist, but our paths crossed regularly in the months that followed. The technology security community was smaller than most people realized, and her expertise in identifying sophisticated fraud operations made her a valuable resource for companies trying to protect themselves from similar threats. The most remarkable aspect of the entire experience, I realized later, was how a single moment of moral courage had prevented catastrophic consequences for so many people. Jessica could have simply written her story from the sidelines, documenting the fraud after it occurred. Instead, she chose to intervene, using her position and knowledge to prevent harm rather than merely report on it after the fact. It was a reminder that heroism often comes from unexpected places, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not by those with the most power or resources, but by those with the courage to speak truth when it matters most. The young waitress who whispered a warning in perfect Mandarin had indeed changed everything, not just for Marcus Wellington and his billion-dollar company, but for an entire industry that had been under siege by forces they didn't even know existed. And in the end, that made all the difference. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.